today the Data Science Incubator is the first actually of a series of meetups about Git. And Git has been a tool that we have been using a lot. Some of us already for years and are quite fluent, and others not so much. And I think that it's very well explained in. I don't know if you see my screen. It's very well explained in this little text here, which you will not probably be able to read, but I will for you. So I think the motivation is the following: like most learners already use Git and have been using it for a year, but a lot of us don't really grasp what Git is and the mental model. We don't have the mental model of how it works, and that kind of allows us to work with Git up to a level, but not beyond. So I would like through this series of meetups to really unleash the power of Git for you, and the idea is to go slow and give opportunity for everyone to expose those kind of broken mental models that we might have, and once we understand how it works, you will realize that it becomes I wouldn't say intuitive, because Git is not intuitive, but at least less horrible that it can be sometimes. Because it's truly powerful, and although there are many systems out there, Git is by far the most used in the world. So I think you can become like really good, a really good worker with it. So the idea, because it's gonna be a series, and I don't want to kind of do what I did before, which is to kind of assume things. I want to cover everything more or less with structure. What I'm gonna be doing is to follow a lesson that has been already proved to work from Code Refinery website, and the lesson is called Introduction to Version Control with Git. And actually it's pretty cool. It has some features that I've learned things myself by reviewing the lesson. So it's not basic at all. It starts slow, and you might think, this I already know, and fine, you're happy to kind of walk away and come back in another meeting. But I think especially the first one is good because it gives us some understanding of the basics of Git and what's the mental model that we need to understand what's coming. But also by following a lesson, I'm hoping that people in the room, or people that couldn't join today, could also be able to teach this. So today I'm going to kick off, but also basically introduce the lesson and the structure that we have, so that if any of you are interested in some particular aspect of the series of lessons, maybe you say, hey, look, I volunteer to teach this one because it's something I really want to learn, and I know that by teaching we learn very well a concept. So maybe this motivates you to explore the curriculum that we have and see if any of the lessons or any section in the lesson is something that you would like to kind of present yourself as a way to kind of force yourself to learn it better. Or the opposite, maybe it's something that you already know very well and you feel comfortable and it's not going to take up a lot of your space. So my approach has been to prepare a little and just to be guided by the lesson. So I'm going to be walking through the lesson with you, and by doing so I'm going to move slow, but which means that for those who really need some time to practice themselves, try things out, that should give them time to kind of keep on track. And those who may be a little faster because they know the concepts, they can also go to sections in the lessons that are for advanced users. So this is kind of the landing page, the issue where I introduce the idea, and I encourage whoever is interested in this series to go to the what should be covered. There you will find a link to the lesson. So I'm gonna click there. So it looks like this. The lesson explains a little bit of what's the goal of the whole lesson and shows many sub lessons. But in particular, I've been reviewing the notes for trainers, and I think that the ones that I highlight here are the most important ones. Also, knowing the crowd that we have, I know that some people already come with some knowledge. So I encourage you to, today hopefully we'll cover motivation and maybe basics. And then I encourage you to go through the other ones and see if any of that is something attractive to you and you would like to teach it. And if no one does, I will. But I think it's a good idea to engage someone else in teaching those lessons. And this is going to be the basic structure, but then I also know of many other resources that are amazing, like really good. Like just to impress you, let me click on this one here, for example, the advanced stuff explained with animations. So for example, we get to the point where we want to talk about branching, this resource, for example, is amazing because it's a visual guide that shows how a Git command changes the history of your repository in a very, very visual and very intuitive way. So maybe if you choose to teach this lesson, maybe you want to kind of jump outside a little bit of the curriculum and show these slides and explain the theory behind what we are teaching through these resources. So basically, I'm inviting you to use any resource, but just to get you started, I think that a very good starting point is the lesson that I mentioned before. So I'm going to skim through and say this is how you fix merge conflicts, and it explains what commands would take you there, what you need to clean, and how you fix that stuff. Anyway, just to impress you a little bit. So let's go now to the motivation. I think I won't spend a lot of time there because motivation is something that I believe most of us here already have for learning Git, and it's just peer pressure. Like a lot of us need Git for just getting things done. But the lesson has a section that covers motivation, but I'm gonna skip it because I dislike it. I prefer instead the instructor guide. So if you will see that the lesson has this very handy menu at the top, so you go to instructor guide, and that will help you if you choose to teach any of these sections. I encourage you to go to instructor guide because it will help you use the material from the perspective of the trainer. And basically, the motivation is what I said before. Version control is fundamental in the kind of work that we do. Maybe one day we can get away without it. Maybe there is a better system, but for now, we just need it. There is a lot of tools on top of Git. Like I've been encouraging people to use this framework to hide all the details of Git. But now that's done, and that you can get a lot of things done with wrappers around Git or with Git clients or even from our studio. But now I'm intentionally going to expose the guts of Git, and we're going to be working a lot on the terminal, also to get you familiarized with it, because sometimes we land in the terminal and there is no other way around it. And I would like you to be familiar and not be scared of the terminal and see, but hopefully to unleash the power, but at least to not be scared of it and to know how to get out of some messy situations from the terminal. Without version control, the code can become a disaster very quickly. Mistakes do happen, but if we have the backup of Git, we are always safe. Imagine the analogy of a climber. So we can climb a rock, but if we are hooked to the rock, if we fall, we're not gonna die. If we don't hook ourselves, a bad fall can be a disaster, right? So that's the safety that Git offers. Another thing is that Git in particular is very good for this idea of branches that we're going to discuss later. But basically, what it allows you is to work on many things at the same time, and that's just reality. Although we like to focus on one thing at a time, it is a fact of life that a lot of other things will be happening in parallel while we do something. So the branching model of Git is amazing in allowing us to work on many projects at the same time, or even the same project in different versions of it. Also, that unleashes collaboration, right? So that's super cool, and reproducibility. We can go back to previous versions of our projects. We can allow people to reproduce what we have done. And here, I think that is the key of why I think this is important for us. Let me see. In most cases, people do not feel comfortable yet with Git, even when they use it. They lack a good mental model of how Git operates, and we are afraid of making mistakes. Raise your hand if you feel identified with that phrase, that we don't fully understand how it works and we are a little afraid to kind of fuck things up. yeah, that's true. And then there's other people that have never used Git and are curious. You hear it a lot, and maybe this is a great opportunity to kind of start from scratch making solid steps as opposed to developing bad habits in a way, like for example poor commit messages and things like that. So yeah, this lesson is all about that, about how to get things done with Git. So enough for motivation. Let's move on to the basics. And here is where I'm going to be kind of showing some of the theory and some code. And I'm going to be moving slow. And when we reach the end of the meeting, we're going to stop and continue next time. I just believe that it is a point where we just need to cover this. We just need to kind of go slowly and make sure that we all get it. And if it takes 5 meetups or 10 meetups, it's going to take that. But then I will also be open to feedback. So if from most of you I hear that it's not being useful or too slow, whatever, then we can change to something else. But let's give it a go and see if this works for now. Before I move on to this, do we have anything, like any comment or any question about the lesson in general, the plan to look ahead, a few meetups, and the motivation part that we have covered? Perfect. Yes. As long as you have access to a terminal that is comfortable for you, that cuts it. Generally, people that work a lot with Git, they have their favorite and super fine-tuned terminal. So once you work a lot with the terminal, you start making it like really cool. But I'm going to avoid that to not distract people. But I'm just going to show you what, for example, my terminal looks like. So I'm going to expand it here, and let's do that. If I want to go to my Git repos, say the data repo, I just do jdata, and that means jump to something that matches the name data, and that takes me to a repository that is that. And I have cool shortcuts, something like, I want to see the status of this project. I do GSS, which means Git status, and I can see the status of this project. It has colors, it has the branch. So terminals can be extremely powerful and can give you a lot of comfort while you work. But for this workshop, I'm going to be using something more vanilla. I'm going to be using the bash terminal, which is this. So if I want to do the same, I have to type git status, and that will give me the same thing. I will be demonstrating a very vanilla terminal to not confuse you, so that you know what comes from the framework I'm trying to teach, as opposed to being distracted by background differences between my terminal and your terminal. But having said that, exactly as you said, if you're in Windows, you might be you will be using very likely the bash terminal, so you will need to type bash in your to execute the bash program, and that will give you a terminal that feels like the one that I have here. If you're on Mac, the terminal program is excellent, and it will give you the same experience. If you're in Linux, the terminal also comes by default, same like with Mac, and you can fine tune it as I do to have like a really cool experience with lots of shortcuts and things like that. And I am very tempted to use the terminal from RStudio for two reasons. One is because many of you may not have already a terminal like that you already prefer or like or use or are familiar with. And RStudio has a tab that is called Terminal. So if you have installed Git and you have RStudio, you will have a terminal. And if you don't have anything of that, I can still share with you a URL like this one here, right? That I can paste on the Google Doc actually, like really any RStudio Cloud project that you open, actually this is an untitled project just for demonstration. So you go to rstudio.cloud, you open any new project, and you will see that there is a tab that's called Terminal, and you can use that one, right? So I'm going to be very likely demonstrating things here just to show you that, an environment that you could reproduce from the web browser, basically. So you don't need to install anything. And then it's up to you when you feel mature enough to start investigating for the platform that you use, Mac, Windows, Linux, or whatever that is, which is, the tool that will help you work most efficiently. But we can't go more lower level than the terminal. So the terminal, that's why I think it's important at this stage. Now that we all know some frameworks that wrap Git, use this. I know the GitHub desktop application. You may use Git Kraken. But at this stage, we already know all that. Let's go now. Actually, open the front of the car and let's actually look at the engine and let's just learn how to work with this. So we are going to be working mostly from the terminal, right? I think it's all from the terminal on purpose. It might feel a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but later, hopefully, you will be kind of familiar. And also, this will expose some of the problems that we face, because when you are in your comfortable environment, okay, you know what to expect. For example, what editor you have configured in your computer. But then you land in a project like this one, and you want to make any modification to a file on the terminal, and you land in Vim, which is a horrible editor for people who's not familiar with it. So I want to teach you how to get out of Vim, how to save files in Vim, not because I'm interested in teaching you Vim, but only because at some point, while working, you will end up in that situation, and it's good for you to know what that is and how you get out of trouble, basically. So basically, we jump fast to motivate people and empower people to use really cool tools with little understanding of the basic models. But now is the point where we have to go back and start filling those gaps, I feel. Sorry, the answer was long because your question was a very good one. So if you have already a terminal that you like, use it. If you don't, I encourage you to go to rstudio.cloud and just click on the tab terminal. And with that, we should be able to do everything that we need. Actually, I'm going to pop up that and put it here on the side. So let's go to here. Where were we? On the basics. Okay, cool. So what is a Git repository? So the way we are going to be using this lesson is with a repository we are going to create. So I encourage you to now get access to some terminal where you can start typing commands. If you don't have one, remember rstudio.cloud. So a Git repository is just a folder called .git, and it saves snapshots of the history of your project. There is a bunch of analogies, so let me expand this. There's a bunch of analogies, and the one that is shown here is one that I like. So basically, when you are about to make this very special save that it has, this that is called a commit. Commit is the unit of change that is fundamental to Git, right? So that commit could be imagined using the analogy of taking a picture. So that commit is actually a picture that you took, a snapshot. But before you take the snapshot, you have to frame, you have to decide what is going to be part of that snapshot, right? So there is obviously a step before. It's not that you just get your camera and press the button anywhere. No, you take the camera and you point and you decide what to include in your in the stage of that photo and what's going to exclude, right? So the step before a commit is then the staging. And there are Git commands for each of those stages. So the Git command, Git add, basically what you're saying is you're framing and saying, well, I'm deciding I'm going to put, person A, person B, and exclude person C. Okay, that's going to be where, I'm preparing the snapshot. And once, I do Git add, I say, yeah, this is what I want, then you do Git commit, and then you take the picture. And what it happens is when you take that picture, that snapshot, the commit containing that snapshot gets stored in your photo album, basically. And that photo album is the Git repository. That folder I told you is called .git. And we're going to have a look at that folder in a moment. So this kind of represents what's the workflow. So basically a file changes, you stage that file so that you put that file in the view of the camera, and when you're ready, boom, you take the picture, and that picture gets stored in your Git repository. Then you edit that file. This is like now we're going now to the other row. You edit that file. There is a new change. So you have to say what goes to the next snapshot by framing again, and then boom, you take a second commit, and that you store it in your Git repository. And then, as any photo album, you can go back in time. You can travel through the snapshots that you saved and look at the history, right? But Git goes, here is where the analogy breaks, because Git is even more powerful. It not only allows you to review the history, but also allows you to change the history. And that is something that has some risks, because, if you saw the movie Back to the Future, you know what problems can come with changing the past, right? That then the future kind of all gets messed up too. So we are going to discuss, when it is safe to change the history and when it is not. And the long story made short is that, when you are already sharing your Git history with someone else, now it is not the time to change the past. You can change the past as long as only you know what that past looked like, because you are working locally in your computer. But then as soon as you push that and share it with someone else, then it's not a good idea to change the history, because you will change it for everyone else. Okay, so first step so that was all the theory. So do we have any comment or question about that? The very basic picture of what Git does, this idea of framing, snapshot, and album. No. Yeah. Okay, so the very first thing that we do with a Git, when we have a Git repo, is to configure it. So if you haven't done so, you should check who is the user and Git email that Git knows about. So that's you do with Git. Sorry, let me make this bigger. One downside of our studio is that it uses a lot of space here to the left. So I can say git config -- list. That will give me a very long list, if there is things configured, of configurations. But I would also say I can be more specific and say, instead of listing all the configurations, I can be more specific and ask Git what are the specific configurations that I would like to look at. So you can type now git config user.name, and if there's nothing, no output, then what you do, you can press the up arrow to recover the last command, and now you decide which is the username that you want to be associated with. So I can say something like Mauro Lepore, right? With you leave a space after user.name and quotation marks, and then you press enter. It says not in a Git repository, so great. So what's going on here? I'm asking Git for information, but I'm not in a Git repo. So great, let's actually create a Git repo, because I haven't done that yet. So I'm gonna be following the instructions here in the lesson. We are gonna be working with a repo that we create. It's gonna be called recipe. We're gonna make a recipe for guacamole. And one way in which you can create a folder from the terminal is with the command mkdir, which stands for make directory. So if I'm in our Studio Cloud, I would be I will have landed on a place that is called Cloud Projects. So this is what the structure of my folder looks like. So I'm gonna make this even a little smaller. So I can do from here. I can do mkdir make directory recipe, and that will create a folder here called recipe, and there you see it, right? So this is the very first command that I typed from the terminal. So now what I want to do is to jump inside recipe. I want to do something equivalent to this, to clicking into recipe and get in there and see what there is, which is nothing because it's empty. So the way I move there is with the command cd for change directory. Cd change directory. See how I'm here in Cloud Projects, but when I do cd recipe, I now get into Cloud Projects recipe, right? So I'm here now. If I want to see what are the contents of that folder, I do ls, and it should output nothing because it is empty, right? But look what happens when I do this command, git init. So once I do git init, and let me see first, I want to make sure that I'm showing the hidden files. So I'm in RStudio Cloud, I'm clicking on the option that says show hidden files, because the git folder, the .git folder is hidden. The dot means that it's going to be hidden by default. So let's do now, let me clear this with Control L. And I'm going to type that git init. And because I'm already inside recipe, it will know that the Git repository that I want to initialize, init comes from initialize, is the one where I'm already in. So I'm already in a folder called recipe, and I did git init, and it says initialized empty Git repository. Inside, this folder called, recipe, and added the folder .git. So I still don't see it here on the right, and I suspect that it's probably because I haven't refreshed. So there you go. I clicked on the arrow here, and I can see a folder that is called .git. So that is now a Git repository, right? Any question here? As any other folder, a Git repository, you can explore it. So you could click in it, and you will see a lot of, you will see the basic structure of a Git repository. I recommend you do not mess up with it, because that you could probably get your repo corrupt. And even if you wanted to remove the Git tracking of this project, you just click this folder and remove it. It is easy and also powerful, right? So if you have a Git project that you have been tracking and you haven't backed it up online or anything, just by removing that folder, you remove the whole history of the project. So be careful. So we are getting close to the end. So I'm going to, let's see, only complete the step that I was about to do before and I couldn't, which is to check if Git already knows who I am. So I'm going to do git config user.name to see if Git, let me expand this, to see if Git knows who I am. So when I type, I'm doing it again, git config username, there is no output, meaning that it is not configured. So I'm going to make now space and say Mauro Lepore. And now if I do again git config username, so without a value, it is a question, right? And with the value, you are setting. So it is a bit confusing because the command git config username, you can use it to set the username or to ask what is the username. So when I say git config username, I'm asking what is the username. If there is one configured, then I get an answer, which in this case is Mauro Lepore. Why? Because I just set it in the step before. So I first asked the question. I got no output, meaning that it wasn't set. I then set that parameter to Mauro Lepore, and now when I ask again, I do get the output. So it's configured to Mauro Lepore. Another very useful configuration that you need is email. So user.email. So I encourage you to follow along if you haven't done so. Your Git should know your username and your email. Those two pieces of information are fundamental to associating every change that you do to this commit to you, because Git knows not only when the changes were made, but also by whom, and what's the email that we will later use for GitHub. So in my case, I do space. So let's repeat. So if I don't give any value to this argument, it will give, it's an answer, a question, sorry, it is a question. So if I ask the question, what is the user email configured? And if there is no answer, that is because it is not configured at all. So now I'm pressing the up arrow to recover the last command. So I'm going to actually set it just by saying, in this case, Mauro Lepore @gmail.com and run. I get no output, and now I ask the question again. What is the user email? And there I have the answer, Mauro Lepore. So now I can do something like git config list. Remember, with list, I ask for all the configurations that Git knows about, and I get a bunch of things, including username and email. And there is a few other options that, at least at this stage, is not very important to discuss, and actually I don't even know what they are. Okay, so time to stop. We have started with a lesson for Git basics. We use the terminal for, in this series for the first time. We created a directory with make dir, we change directory into that repository, and we initialize a Git repository with git init. So git init is one of the basic commands, and we also configure the repository so it knows who we are. So next session, we are going to be starting from here. We are going to be exploring the status, and we are going to be actually making changes in our Git repository. So that's the end of this meetup. But before saying bye, I would like to see if there is any questions or comments. And also, I encourage you to send me feedback, maybe through Slack, about what you think of this series coming along. So any questions or comments before we go? Okay, cool. Just a reflection, quick reflection. For now, does it feel like too slow, just right, or too fast? Just right? Okay, then we'll keep more or less at this pace. Okay, thank you very much. Again, I encourage you to send feedback on Slack, and I'm going to incorporate that in the next series. I anticipate this to be a long series, so we have to make it enjoyable. See you next time. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.